All right, the question is, my husband confessed his adultery a few months ago. I decided to stay with him, and he swears that he's ended it and he's being faithful. Should I believe him? How can I tell if he's getting better? Well, of course, the short answer is you can't verify, you can't prove one way or another in every way whether or not he's getting better. You made a decision by faith to trust him and to stay within the marriage. Now the question is, how are you going to deal with the lack of trust that remains? So let's start with you. You're grieving. I mean, when you've been betrayed, you grieve, right? Because when you take the vows, you assume that the person you took the vows with is going to keep the vows he made. And when you find out that that assumption has died, you go through the grieving process that's associated with death. This is the death of an assumption, and it's a very hard kind of a death. Truth be told, I think you're going through one of the worst of all human experiences, betrayal. Betrayal is one of the worst things an individual can go through. There will be, as a result, the roller coaster. There will be rage, there will be depression, there will be numbness, there will be deep vulnerability, there will be fear. What surprises might be coming next? How am I ever going to feel safe again? All of those are things you're going to be dealing with now. So I want to strongly suggest you be sure you've got some support for yourself. A pastor to lean on, a trusted mentor, close friend, family, someone to talk to while you're processing all that has happened to you. And of course, every situation is different, so I don't want to try to apply too many broad principles to your situation, but let me tell you a few things that you should be looking for if your husband has confessed and told you that he has cut off all ties and is walking in a different direction. You should look for action, investment, and remorse. Those are three. Action, investment, remorse. Let's start with action. Wherever there is repentance, there's action, because that's what repentance is about. Confession is an acknowledgement of sin. Repentance is actively turning away from a sin and turning towards righteousness. So, did you see him cut off all ties? You should. John the Baptist said, Luke 3:8, bring forth fruit worthy of repentance. If you say you've repented, what have you done to show it? One of the primary things you must do is separate yourself from whatever it is that you've been involved in that took you outside of God's will. Did he cut off all ties? You should be able to ascertain that. Has he come clean with you? I mean, a lot of men, unfortunately, employ what I call the Chinese water torture, where they drip, drip, drip out their confession and say, well, I committed adultery once. No, I committed it 3 times. Well, I committed adultery, but I also used porn, and so forth and so on. Ask him to just let it all come. Now, I know unless you put him on a lie detector test, you cannot prove, but still, you should be asking him for full disclosure. You want to see that he has cut off ties as much as you can ascertain. Has he turned away from whatever it was? The person he was involved in, the places he went, whatever led him into that behavior, has he cut off those ties? Has he done what Jesus said? Your hand offends you, you cut it off. Did he reject it by separating himself from it? Has he come clean with you? Those are the kinds of actions you should see. Then you should see investment. That is, you should not just see him say, I'm sorry for what I've done. I've cut off that illicit relationship. I have cut off all ties. So let's just move on. No, let's not. You need to see him making investments, a very important part of repentance. Where there's investment in some sort of counsel or accountability, because something happened in his heart that brought him to the point where he would make such a decision in the first place. The betrayal of a marriage vow is a huge transgression. It's not made lightly. Something happened in the heart to lead to that betrayal. That's something your husband needs to better understand and work on, because he wants to prevent it from ever happening again. So you should see that he's investing in some sort of mentoring or some sort of counseling. Now, that can be pastoral counseling. It can be done with a ministry leader. It could be professional Christian counseling. He should be getting some guidance as to how to basically manage his feelings in the future. There should be some sort of accountability involved as well that he's investing in. Why, James said, James 5:16, confess your faults one to another and pray for one another. Now, really, if your husband had taken the time to confess his temptation to commit adultery before he committed it, there's a very good chance he never would have committed it. That's why the author of Hebrews said, Hebrews 3:13, exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened in your hearts through the deceitfulness of sin. That mutual exhortation and accountability is critical in keeping a man on track. So you should see investment in counsel and or accountability. You should also see investment in spiritual disciplines. Look for that in your husband. Just ask him. Are you in the Word daily? Are you developing your prayer life? Jesus said, John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Now, how are you going to love him? You got to know him to love him. How do you know him? By reading his word, by communing with him in prayer. The more your husband loves God, the safer you can feel, the more assured you can be that this will never happen again. Look to see that he's involved in spiritual disciplines. And ask him to be more invested in you as well. Ask him if on a weekly basis he could check in with you and just tell you, honey, this is what I learned this week. This is what I've been dealing with this week. This is how I've been doing this week. And this is how I'm managing my feelings. And I'd like to know, honey, how you're doing as well. Ask him to make that weekly investment in you. I call it the State of the Union meeting. It can do a lot of good for a marriage. So you want to see action, you want to see investment, and you want to see remorse. That is to say, you want to see that there is some real godly sorrow that has happened and is happening in your man's life. How do you see that there's remorse? Well, first of all, you will see that he does not have unreasonable expectations of you. It's unreasonable for a husband to say, yeah, I know I hurt you, but I've confessed it, so just get over it, forgive me, and let's move on. Now, that's unreasonable. You've been wounded by his behavior. Where there's remorse, there won't be a push to cause you to stop feeling pain over what he did to you. Real remorse is shown in, for example, what the prodigal son said when he returned home and said, hey, I don't expect things to be the same. Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven, and I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Put me in the barn. Now that's remorse, because that means there's a reasonable expectation. There should also be evidence of sorrow. Words, expressions. Honey, I'm sorry. It hurts me that I've hurt you. I'm glad you forgave me, but I want you to know it still is not okay with me. I'm in pain over what I did. You should see evidence of sorrow in words and in expressions. And finally, you really should see humility. Not humiliation. This is not the time for you to have the upper hand and use it against him. It's not the time for you to browbeat him with his sin. It's not the time for you to refuse to look at any sins in your own life that might be there. No, not at all. But where there's humility, there is a tenderness. There is a gratitude that you have forgiven him. There is the heart of a servant, which is really what a husband is to be to a wife. Paul said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, how did Christ love the church? What did Jesus say? The Son of Man came to serve, not to be served. He came to serve. So you should see deference to you and your needs, and you should see gratitude, okay? So what do you look for? Action, investment, and remorse. If you don't see those things, you have a problem. If you do see those things, you still have a problem, but it's a problem which is clearly getting better. That's good news. Now, if you want to follow up on this, I wrote a book called The Game Plan, a men's 30-day plan for purity, and you can find the link to that on the content description for this page. Also, I wrote an article called How Do I Know He's Getting Better? You can also find the link to that on the content description for the page. If you'd like to talk about this and set an appointment with me, just go to joedallas.com, look under Counseling Services. That'll show you how to sign up for a counseling appointment. And if you'd like to support this ministry so we can go on providing free content, just go to joedallas.com/giving. That'll show you how to partner with us. Well, I'm Joe, and this is the short answer. I hope it's been helpful to you. God bless.